Ever wonder why your grandfather had 9 fingers? Or why old-timers called it the Widowmaker? Today's hay balers are engineering marvels of safety compared to the iron beasts that ruled American farms for most of the 20th century. These machines turn boys into men and sometimes into statistics. 10. The stationary belt drive systems. Before 1940, most American hay presses ran on massive leather belts powered by stationary engines or tractors. Companies like the Kansas City Hay Press Company and Whitman Agricultural built these monsters that required perfect belt alignment. The belt on a belt pulley system meant constant exposure to spinning leather and metal. No guards, no emergency stops, just raw power transfer through exposed belts and pulleys. These belt drives were temperamental beasts. Weather affected the leather, causing slippage when wet or becoming brittle in extreme heat. Farmers often dressed the belts with sticky compounds that made them even more grabby. The hay press was the common name for these stationary baling implements before 1937, powered by a tractor or stationary engine using a belt on a belt pulley, with hay being brought to the baler and fed in by hand. Workers had to maintain and adjust these systems while running because stopping meant losing valuable baling time. The transition to PTO-driven balers in the 1940s eventually eliminated these belt systems, but not before claiming countless injuries. Old-timers would splice broken belts with metal lacings that became dangerous when they failed. The biggest change to balers since 1940 has been powering them through the tractor's power takeoff instead of by built-in internal combustion engines or belt systems. Those belt-driven balers shaped a generation of farmers who learned that machinery demanded respect or it would take its payment in blood. 9 manual wire tying stations. Picture this. You're sitting on a bouncing metal seat attached to a Case NCM wire tie baler, threading sharp wire through wooden blocks while the machine churns away inches from your hands. This was reality for the tie men who worked these balers from the 1930s through the 1960s. The Case NCM models required 2 to 3 workers, 1 to drive the tractor and 2 sitting on seats attached to the bale chute, where they had the dusty job of feeding and tying wires. The wire itself was a weapon. Each piece had razor-sharp ends where the machine-made loops terminated. Working barehanded meant torn skin and bloody palms within minutes. Even with leather gloves, the repetitive motion of pulling, twisting, and tying wore through protection quickly. According to documented accounts from Iowa farmer Dale Guys, "Looking down, I saw my skin torn and bloody. The wires had sharp ends where the machine-made loops ended. I went away bloody and shamed, but proud to have been there." The timing was critical. The blocker had to ram wooden blocks into the bale chute in the brief interval, while the horizontal packer arm was withdrawn. Meanwhile, the tie man on the other side had to grab the wires poked through the block slots and tie them before the next compression cycle. John Deere introduced their wire tying Model 116W baler in 1946, which was one of the first successful automatic wire tying machines. The New Holland Model 66, introduced in 1952-1953, finally brought affordable automatic tying to smaller farms, selling 84,000 units and ending this dangerous manual process for most American farmers. Before we move on to the next one in the list, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. Thanks to all of you who do. 8 exposed plunger mechanisms. The heart of every hay baler is its plunger, a massive ram that compresses loose hay into tight bales. On balers built before the 1950s, like the Ann Arbor Company models first made in 1929 and early Oliver equipment, these plungers operated completely exposed. The plunger featured serrated wooden teeth that would compress hay into a hole in the center of the baler, operating methodically up and down, powered by a belt from a tractor. Early stationary balers had operators standing on platforms next to the compression hole with everything vibrating and shaking while the floor became slick from the polishing effect of thousands of tons of hay. One slip toward that plunger meant certain catastrophe. The mechanism operated continuously fast enough that human reflexes couldn't save you once you were caught. According to historical accounts, farmers described these plungers as looking like an instrument of danger, and like a huge beaked bird. These plungers generated tremendous forces. In modern large square balers, plungers compress with 200 to 750 kilonewtons, 45,000 to 169,000 pounds force, and early versions, while less powerful, still generated enough force to crush anything in their path. Operators had to reach near the bale chamber to clear jams or adjust hay flow while the machinery was running, as stopping meant significant production delays. What made these especially treacherous was the complete lack of safety features. It wasn't until Ed Nolt's innovations in 1937-1940, when he built about 35 copies of his field pickup baler before selling the design to New Holland, that safer feeding mechanisms began to appear. By the late 1950s, manufacturers finally started adding safety gates and shields, but the damage to a generation of farmers had already been done. 7 unshielded power takeoff shafts. Of all the killers on this list, exposed PTO shafts have been documented as one of the most persistent hazards. From the 1940s through well into the 1980s, PTO injuries remained common. These shafts spin at either 540 or 1,000 revolutions per minute, which means at 540 revolutions per minute, the shaft pulls in material at 7 feet per second, and at 1,000 revolutions per minute, 13 feet per second. The average person's reaction time is about 3/4 of a second. At 540 revolutions per minute, a person would be pulled about 5.25 feet into the PTO before they even realized they were in danger. The universal joints were particularly dangerous, with protruding pins and bolts perfect for snagging clothing. According to safety documentation, if clothing doesn't tear or rip away, a person's limb or body may begin to wrap with the clothing. Master shields were commonly removed from tractors for several documented reasons: damaged shields that were never replaced, shields removed for convenience of attaching machine drive shafts, shields removed out of necessity for attaching certain implements, and shields missing when used tractors were sold. Multiple documented incidents confirm the danger. The CDC reported scalping incidents involving hay balers in New York in 1991, where women's hair became entangled in unguarded PTO components. Agricultural safety reports consistently show that nearly all incidents involving moving machinery, such as hay balers, manure spreaders, rotary mowers, were non-moving at the time of the incident. The PTO was left engaged. It wasn't until comprehensive safety regulations and manufacturer requirements in the late 1970s and 1980s that proper PTO shielding became standard on all new equipment. 6 built-in gasoline engines. Before reliable PTO systems became standard, many balers came equipped with their own gasoline engines. The Burkett Motor Hay Press, built by Burkett Manufacturing Company of Columbus, Ohio, was equipped with Burkett's own gasoline engine, which was easily removed for other purposes. These air-cooled gasoline engines mounted on the baler provided power before PTO drives became common in the 1940s. These engines ran continuously during baling operations, creating multiple hazards. Wisconsin engines were commonly used on case hand-tie balers and were notorious for not starting when hot farmers reported having to fill them with gas every morning and let them run all day because they wouldn't restart if stopped. The combination of hot engines, dry hay, and gasoline created obvious fire hazards that plagued farming operations. The vibration from these engines regularly caused mechanical failures and loosened components. Carburetor issues were common, and the lack of proper spark arresters meant that engine backfires could ignite hay dust. Many of these engines were V4 Wisconsin models on case balers, while other manufacturers used various small horsepower units. When New Holland introduced the Model 66 PTO-powered baler in 1953, the industry's first PTO-powered baler according to company records, it eliminated the need for these dangerous onboard engines. The Model 66 cost $1,850 compared to larger models at nearly $2,500, making safer technology accessible to more farmers. The transition to PTO power removed one of the most significant fire hazards from hay baling operations. 5 exposed compression rollers, the Alice Chalmers Roto Baler, which began production after the company bought Umo F. Lubin's patent rights in 1940, revolutionized round baling but came with deadly exposed compression rollers. According to documented safety reports, these compression rollers at the top of the conveyor could pull in material at 4.4 feet per second. The gap between rollers was perfectly sized to create an in-running nip point that could grab hands, arms, or clothing. Safety investigations documented specific incidents, including an Iowa Face report describing a farmer whose arms were trapped in the compression rollers nearly to the elbow, with his chest compressed and crushed against the sidewall of the conveyor. The roto-baler was missing a feed roll safety guard that would prevent reaching over the sidewall and directly accessing the in-running nip point at the compression roller. Within 3 years of introduction, Allis-Chalmers had sold 23,000 roto-balers, spreading this hazard across American farms. The danger persisted for decades. In 1986, Deutz Allis, the company that acquired Allis-Chalmers' farm equipment division in 1985, sent letters to dealers regarding the potential hazards identified in the roto-baler as equipment was resold and safety shields and operators' manuals were lost. The 1987 Operator's Manual Supplement finally indicated proper placement of warning labels and safety guards. Gary Vermeer's introduction of the modern round baler design in 1971, using belts to compact hay into a cylindrical shape, eventually provided a safer alternative. But thousands of the original roto-balers continued operating without proper guards well into the 1980s, each one a potential tragedy waiting to happen. 4 manual pickup feed systems. Before automatic pickups became standard, early pickup balers required significant manual assistance. The Ann Arbor Agricultural Company pioneered the pickup baler in 1929 that picked up windrows directly from the field, but it still required 3 people to operate one to drive the tractor and 2 to ride on the baler. J.I. Case also introduced a field-type pickup baler in the early 1930s with similar labor requirements. The pickup mechanisms on these early models had spring steel teeth rotating at ground speed. Workers would walk alongside or ride on the baler, using pitchforks to feed missed hay into the pickup. According to historical accounts, when users weren't watching what they did with the pitchfork and didn't time things right, the mechanism would grab the pitchfork and that's the end of it. Some operators lost pitchforks regularly, and worse, some lost their arms when they held on too long. The real danger came during blockages. Standard procedure required stopping to clear wrapped hay, but this meant significant time loss. Penn State Extension documents note that farmers often attempted to clear blockages while equipment was running despite the obvious dangers. The combination of moving machinery, slippery conditions, and fatigue created what safety experts called a perfect storm for accidents. It wasn't until 1936 when Innes invented an automatic baler with a self-tie system using Appleby-type knotters from a John Deere grain binder and Ed Nolt's improved version in 1938-1940 that truly automatic pickup and feeding became possible. New Holland's commercialization of this technology in the 1940s finally eliminated the need for workers to manually assist the pickup mechanism, though adoption took years as farmers slowly replaced their dangerous older equipment. 3 operator presence and interlock systems, or the absence thereof. From the early 1900s through the pre-1980s era, American-made balers had absolutely no operator presence controls or safety interlocks. These machines would run as long as the engine or PTO supplied power, regardless of whether anyone was actually operating them. New Holland, John Deere, Case, and International Harvester all produced balers that kept running whether the operator was on the tractor, clearing a jam, or being dragged into the mechanism. The machine didn't know and didn't care. The statistics reveal the deadly cost of this design flaw. According to agricultural safety documentation from the National Agricultural Safety Database, nearly all incidents involving moving machinery, such as hay balers, manure spreaders, rotary mowers, were non-moving at the time of the incident. The PTO was left engaged. Farmers would routinely leave the tractor seat with the PTO still engaged to adjust twine tension, clear blockages, or check bale density. The baler kept right on cycling the plunger hammering, the pickup teeth spinning, the knotter mechanisms operating all without anyone in control. One slip on hay-slick ground meant being pulled into machinery that wouldn't stop until someone else disengaged the PTO. Most pre-1980s small square balers completely lacked any form of operator presence detection or emergency stops. The New Holland Model 66 introduced in 1953, the International Harvester, Model 47 wire tie baler, and the John Deere Model 116W from 1946 would continue operating indefinitely as long as the tractor PTO was engaged. There were no seat switches, no electronic cutoffs, no emergency stop buttons, just raw mechanical operation that continued regardless of human presence. It wasn't until the 1980s that manufacturers began installing operator presence controls tied to tractor seat switches. Modern balers like the John Deere 560M round baler now stop all moving components if the tractor PTO disengages or if an emergency stop is pressed. But for nearly 80 years of American hay baling, the machines simply ran until someone manually stopped them or until they ran out of things to compress, including operators. 2 flywheel and belt guards, or lack thereof. The massive flywheels on balers were completely exposed on most models through the 1960s. These cast iron components stored tremendous energy to smooth out the compression stroke. Modern balers use flywheels attached to asymmetrical designs to provide extra force as they pack bales. The stored energy meant they continued spinning long after power was cut, creating an extended danger period. Belt drives connecting the flywheel to the plunger operated under extreme tension. Historical accounts describe 3-inch wide leather belts that, when they broke, became dangerous projectiles. The metal lacings used for belt repairs were particularly hazardous. Farmers described the telltale ping sound that preceded a lacing failure, which could send metal clips flying at high velocity. International Harvester's 1912 Harvester hay press, like most of that era, had minimal guarding around these components. The flywheel had to be accessible for maintenance, as operators needed to oil bearings and adjust components while the machine was running. Stopping for maintenance meant cooling down, and restarting a hot baler was notoriously difficult with the technology of the time. Oliver Farm Equipment Company, which acquired Ann Arbor Company in 1943, didn't produce its own automatic tying baler until 1949, and these early models had typically exposed flywheel configurations. According to farm equipment historians, guards started appearing in the 1960s, but were often removed by farmers who felt they interfered with maintenance and operation. It wasn't until strict safety regulations in the 1970s that comprehensive flywheel guards became mandatory and farmers were prohibited from removing them. One-hand-fed hay presses. The most dangerous of all baler features was the manual feeding platform of stationary hay presses used from the 1900s through the late 1930s. Before 1937, the hay press was the common name for these stationary implements. Companies like Kansas City Hay Press Company, International Harvester, and Whitman Agricultural Company manufactured these machines that required operators to stand on platforms and manually fork hay into compression chambers. According to historical accounts from the 1940s, operators stood on platforms that vibrated and shook with each compression stroke, becoming slick from the polishing effect of hay passing over them. The plunger came driving down like a huge beaked bird, smashing hay into the bale chamber. Operators had to time their hay feeding perfectly between plunger strokes. There were no safety mechanisms, emergency stops, or guards between workers and the compression chamber. Dale Geiss's historical account describes the scene. My dad stood on the platform next to the hole, everything shivering, shaking, and vibrating, the floor slick from the polishing of thousands of tons of hay. Workers could process up to 72 bales in one day, according to Pioneer equipment records, but this meant hours of exposure to these dangerous conditions. The wooden hay press, built by William Henry Penniston in Fox, Missouri in 1863, was entirely hand-operated, requiring workers to fill the upright chamber with hay, pack it with a lever-operated jack-type ratchet, and tie the bale with wire or cord. These early presses evolved into the powered versions of the early 1900s, but the fundamental danger remained humans feeding material directly into powerful compression mechanisms. When automatic pickup balers arrived in the 1940s, particularly New Holland's commercialization of Ed Nolt's design, farmers finally had an alternative to these deadly manual feed systems. These 10 deadly features shaped American agriculture and the farmers who survived them. Every safety regulation, every protective shield, every emergency stop represents someone who didn't make it home for supper. Today's balers are technological marvels of safety, but they're built on lessons written in blood. Next time you see an old-timer missing fingers, remember they earned those battle scars feeding America. If you found value in this walk through history, hit that subscribe button and help us preserve these stories before they're lost forever. Stay safe out there, and remember, machinery doesn't care how tough you are.